Welcome back. Alright, so I often do videos on teams that are struggling. I want to do a video on a team that's not struggling, the Edmonton Oilers. I did do a video on them early in the season when they were struggling, then they fired their coach, and since then things have gotten a lot better. So they started 3-9-1 under Jay Woodcroft. I still think Jay Woodcroft's a good coach. I still think he's going to get another job in the NHL, but since the change to Chris Knoblauch, they've been 18-6. So an Oilers team that was very much in disarray and having a lot of trouble. Not so much since then. They won the first two after Knoblauch took over, and then they lost 3 in a row. But then they won 8, they've lost 3, and then they won 8 in a row, and that's the streak that they're currently on. So that is 16 wins out of 19 games by my count. So that's not too shabby at all. Now, since the coaching change, their goals for per game, they're first in the NHL with 4. And again, this is in the time since the coaching change, ranked against every other team. 2.63 goals against per game is 6th. So all of the discussion about their goaltending and the defense and how it's no good, it all falls by the wayside when you look at how they've played over the last 20-plus games. Their power play, 5th in the league, 27% over that period in time. 4th in the league in penalty killing at 87.5%. So their special teams have been elite. The Oilers have been fantastic. Really glad the Canucks got done. Well, not done, but dealt with them early in the season before the coaching change. They're 33.7 shots per game. That's tied for 4th in the NHL. Their 28.4 shots against per game is 6th. So they're getting the shots. They're keeping the shots against down. Their power play's good. Their penalty kill's fantastic. So what does their upcoming schedule look like? Well, tonight they're at Detroit against the Wings. On Saturday, they're at Montreal. Those are both winnable games for a team playing as well as Edmonton's playing right now. Then they have a couple of days off. On Tuesday, they're at home against the Toronto Maple Leafs. That game could be fantastic. Thursday, the 18th, they're at home against the Kraken. Kraken are one of the hottest teams in the league as well. Saturday, the 20th, they're at Calgary against the Flames. Any Battle of Alberta is fantastic. 23rd, the Tuesday, they're at home against Columbus. The 25th, the Thursday, they're at home against Chicago. And then on Saturday, the 27th, they're at home against the Preds. And then they get the All-Star break. So that should be a ton of fun. And, of course, that's the last night that I'm watching games at home. And then I'm out on the road myself until the All-Star break. So it is going to be interesting to see if they can keep this up. Because that schedule doesn't look so daunting, does it? And even when they don't bring their A game, which I don't think they did in their most recent victory against Chicago, it's still a victory. And that's the really important part, is they're still getting the wins, right? Even when they don't necessarily bring their A game. That's when you know a team's dialed in. So since Knoblauch took over, look at their position in relation to other teams in the division. I wasn't worried about Anaheim or San Jose because it's Anaheim and San Jose. But they've gained 2 points on the Canucks, showing the Canucks are playing quite well, too, that they've only gained 2 points on Vancouver. They've gained 5 points on the Flames. They've gained 6 points on the Kraken. And, of course, they're ahead of the Flames. They're ahead of the Kraken now. And they've gained 8 points on the LA Kings, who are ahead of them, but maybe not for long. I believe they're only 4 points back of the LA Kings now. And they've gained 10 points on the Vegas Golden Knights, who are dealing with injuries and going through their own slump, and have been for some time. So for the Oilers, there's a very real possibility that they could jump their way up the division standings and end up second in the division, or end up first. Because while they've only gained 2 points on the Canucks, you can then get into the question of, do the Canucks play as well in the second half as the first half? The second half of the season looks like a more difficult schedule for Vancouver than the first half. So if you want to make the argument that the Oilers could still win the division, I will agree that they absolutely could end up winning the division. And it's interesting because before the season started, there were a lot of people pegging them as, you know, the team to come out of the West in the Stanley Cup playoffs for 2024. And that prediction looked pretty bad when they got off to that 3-9-1 start. But of course, they're much better lately, so that prediction looks a lot safer now than it did. But since the change of coach, what it really got going is McDavid. McDavid before the coaching change. It felt like he came back too quickly from his injury. I understood he wanted to come back. He wanted to play in the Heritage game, but it did feel like he wasn't quite himself. But pretty quickly after Knoblauch took over, it's McDavid again. So in the 24 games since the change, 13 goals, 32 assists, 45 points. Putting up more than 1 assist per game is ridiculous in today's National Hockey League. So McDavid's been excellent. So all this discussion about who the favorites are to win the Hart Trophy and who's going to be MVP in the league, I don't know if we should be surprised if it ends up being McDavid when the dust clears on it. And I don't know if we should be surprised if he wins the Art Ross either. It feels like it shouldn't be a surprise, but after the start to the season he had, combined with the injury and everything, it's been quite the run for him lately. Draisaitl, 24 games, 14 goals, 14 assists, 28 points. The odd thing is, they're 18-6, and Draisaitl's not putting up points at the rate that he has been in previous seasons. But is he playing better than he has in previous seasons? Are we seeing a more complete game from Draisaitl? Questions I'm asking, and I know there's people who don't like Draisaitl's defensive game, which is fine because the offense is there, and he's still producing more than a point per game. Zach Hyman has been dynamite. 23 games, 18 goals, 9 assists, 27 points. 18 goals in 23 games from Zach Hyman is absolutely incredible. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins in 24 games, 8 goals, 19 assists, 27 points. Stays around a point per game. Bouchard, 24 games, 6 goals, 21 assists, 27 points. He stayed around a point per game since the coaching change as well. So that's remarkable. You have 5 guys right there who are producing at least a point per game under Chris Knobloch. It's been a really remarkable run. McLeod, 24 games, 7 goals, 7 assists, 14 points. Ryan McLeod, really starting to show what I've seen for years. He's a very good player. I've often said I think that his offense is a little better than what he's shown so far. I think what he's shown since Knobloch took over is pretty indicative of that level of talent. Fogle, the hardest working player in the league. I'm going to say that just because why not? Just throw that out there. But yeah, Fogle does work for every single shift he gets. 24 games, 4 goals, 10 assists, 14 points. It's nice to see him putting up more than a half a point per game and being rewarded with ice time as well. Fogle is one of my favorite Oilers, if not favorite Oiler. Kane, 23 games, 11 goals, 2 assists, 13 points. And I mentioned this in the preview this morning. Evander Kane's offense over the last month or so has not been great. The fact they're winning games at the rate they are without getting goals from Kane. And this is a team that for years we've talked about the production on the wings and how they want more. They haven't needed Kane because they've been getting scoring from elsewhere. And again, McDavid's just been fantastic. Ekholm, 24 games, 3 goals, 9 assists, 12 points. I think Oiler fans now have seen enough of a sample size with Ekholm to start to understand why, at times, I've rated him as one of the better defensemen in the league. And whenever I talk about underrated defensemen, Ekholm's name is one of the first ones I mention. I love Matthias Ekholm's game. I think he's playing really, really well for the Oilers. That was a brilliant pickup by Ken Holland. Nurse may never justify that contract, sure, but you know what? He's played well. 24 games, 2 goals, 9 assists, 11 points, and he's been a positive on the ice. Nurse's contract is there until I think it's 2030 before that expires, but honestly, he's not hurting them right now. I think he's playing the best hockey he has since he signed that contract. And then there's the net. Skinner, 15-4 with a .917 save percentage. Skinner's back to being what he was last year. He's not going to end up in the Vezina conversation, but he's a good goaltender. And the numbers back that up. Pickard, 3-2 with a .904 save percentage. Again, he's not threatening Skinner for that starting job, but he's given them capable goaltending, which is what you want from a backup goaltender, and a positive record as well. What more could you ask for from Pickard, right? So their cap space is not there. They have $390,609 in cap space according to Cap Friendly. And there's the buried penalty. So when you send a player to the minors, there's only a certain amount of their money that comes off the books, because it's basically the Wade Redden rule, where Wade Redden gets signed by the Rangers. It's not working out, so they just send him to the minors, and they got forgiven the entire amount of his contract, which I think was $6 million a year. It was a lot. So now, because you can't bury the entire contract, you bury a little over $1 million. Campbell still counts for $3.85 million of a cap hit, and that's all the way through 2027. This is part of the reason I've argued, if they decide to bring Campbell up and just see if his play's improved and try to nurse him back into the league, I think that's beneficial to them, because you need to improve his value. He's signed to that contract through 2027. I don't think there's a team touching that. And I say that even though Cal Peterson was traded by the Kings, and he didn't look very tradable, but pretty sure Peterson's contract, I think, ends this coming summer. And in the case of Campbell going through 2027, I don't know how many teams are going to want to pick that up, even though the salary cap is supposed to go up this summer and the following summers. Campbell's contract is still there. And so this is part of the reason why I've said, if they're able to get him to where he needs to be with the Condors and bring him back up, it makes more sense. You want him to come up. If you're an Oilers fan and you want to see that contract go, then you want him to play well in the AHL and come up. and play well enough that he improves his trade value, and then somebody might call, because there are definitely teams that need goaltending, and right now I don't know that they'd be calling about Jack Campbell. Draisaitl's contract expires in 2025. It's something that we're going to hear a lot about coming up to this summer, right? And how the Oilers perform the rest of the regular season is one thing. The playoffs are going to be huge for the Oilers this year. Draisaitl again, UFA in 2025. The Oilers need to get this done. If the Oilers are going to win a championship with Draisaitl and McDavid, they need to take those steps there. And if they had a run to the final, they had even a run to the conference final this year, something like that, then I think it makes it far more likely that Draisaitl would say, yeah, I'll sign another extended deal. It's not going to be as team-friendly as this current contract, but that's the trick, right? McDavid's contract is up in 2026. Between now and 2026, there's going to be players who get more money than McDavid's currently getting because of when he signed his contract. But believe me, when McDavid's contract's up in 2026, whatever the top player in the NHL is making, McDavid will get more. He is, I still think, the best player in the National Hockey League. I think because of the injury he had early this year and the slow start too, it's kind of muddied the waters a bit. So I understand other players, being in consideration for that, but McDavid I still think is the best player in the National Hockey League. And so when that contract expires, I would figure he's going to get paid like that. They do have their own first-round picks this year, next year, and the year after. So Ken Holland at the deadline could move a first-round pick. Maybe in order to help move that Campbell contract, you're going to have to move a first-round pick. There are still some intriguing prospects there as well that they could potentially move in order to bring somebody in to help shore this team up. The one thing is, since they're second in points percentage, since Knobloch took over, they have a 750 points percentage. They're second only to the Jets, who have an 808 points percentage over the same period of time. What do they need? So the thing with the Oilers is, if they decide they need major surgery, you may need to find somebody to take Campbell's contract. I don't know that there's a big contract on this team that you want to move. I looked at their team's cap structure, and again, we can point out the Nurse contract. That's not going anywhere. I don't think there's necessarily a bad contract for a player who's having a bad season they necessarily want to move. So the Oilers are in an interesting place right now. The team looks pretty good. They don't have cap space to make improvements. I don't know how much of an improvement you want. I think maybe a depth forward, depth defenseman, and if you don't trust Campbell to come up and play for you at any point this season, do you look to maybe add a goaltender? And, then you'd have Pickard in the minors with Campbell. That's a pretty good tandem then for Bakersfield. Do you look to add basically a backup to Skinner that you trust to play more games? So like, for instance, Jake Allen out of Montreal, just as an example. I know the salary cap hit doesn't work, but that's just as an example. While Pickard's played well, Allen I think would be an upgrade over Pickard. But it will be interesting to see what they do, because they do have their own draft picks. They don't have cap space, but they can get creative at the deadline. They're going to be an interesting team to watch when the deadline rolls around, because now they're going to be buyers. Whereas back in October and early November, we were looking at them and thinking, are they going to be sellers? Is Draisaitl going to want out? How much of a disaster is this going to be? And it's turned around. But let me know your thoughts. And so for Oiler fans, where do you put the most credit for this turnaround? Is it that Connor McDavid's healthy again? He's helping. Is it that the whole team's bought in since the coaching change? Did the coaching change the systems that much that you feel like this has caused the team to rise up through the standings again? Or is it just they were a good team anyways, and the coaching change was that slap in the face that was needed for the team in order to turn around their play on the ice? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.